The world does not begin with the sunrise. It begins with the first flicker of consciousness in the dark. Before the sun has cleared the horizon, before the birds have begun their morning chorus, there is a silent, singular moment of transition. The threshold between the infinite potential of sleep and the rigid boundaries of the waking world. Consider the common man. His eyes open, his heart beats. But before his feet touch the floor, he has already surrendered his sovereignty. He reaches for the device, the glowing monolith at his bedside, and in that singular motion, he invites the entire chaos of the world to colonize his mind. He scans for the missed notification, the pending crisis, the lingering insult from a colleague, or the hollow ache of a bank balance. He is not a creator in this moment, he is a casualty. He is a reactive entity, a vessel being filled by the fears and demands of others before he has even had the chance to assert his own existence. This is the paradox of the modern condition. Humanity possesses the innate power to shape reality, yet spends the most vital hour of the day performing a ritual of submission. The clock demands his time, the screen demands his attention, and the ghosts of yesterday's failures demand his emotional energy. He is playing a game he has already lost, a game where the rules are written by circumstance rather than conviction. He moves through his morning as if walking through a heavy, invisible fog, tethered to the expectations of a world that does not know his true worth. But what if the morning was not a time to be managed, but a time to be commanded? What if the first breath of the day was not a sigh of resignation, but an act of decree? Imagine, for a moment, that the vacuum of the early hour is not an empty space to be filled with anxiety, but a blank canvas of absolute, divine potential, and that the one holding the brush is not the world, but you. To understand why this daily surrender is so pervasive, one must deconstruct the architecture of the human ego. Why does the mind, in those fragile first seconds of wakefulness, immediately reach for the negative? Why is the default state of the unanchored consciousness one of lack? The answer lies in the survival-based programming of the primitive brain. For millennia, the human organism was tuned to scan for threats. In the ancient wilderness, the rustle of leaves was a signal of a predator. The drop in temperature was a signal of coming hunger. We are evolutionarily wired to prioritize the problem over the possibility. However, in the modern age, where tigers have been replaced by text messages and scarcity is often a mental construct rather than a physical reality, this ancient vigilance has become a liability. It is the ego's way of maintaining a familiar albeit painful equilibrium. When one wakes up and immediately scans for what is wrong, one is engaging in recursive feedback. You look for the problem manifests in your mental landscape. The emotion of that problem sends a chemical signal through your body. Your body, reacting to that chemistry, reinforces the thought that you are in a state of struggle. This is the closed loop. It is a system that creates a reality of not enough because the mind refuses to acknowledge any other frequency. How, then, does one break this cycle? It requires the implementation of a pattern interruption. If the current reality is a shadow cast by the mind's previous thoughts, then to change the shadow, one must change the projector. The why is simple. You cannot experience a life of mastery while you are playing the part of the servant to your own subconscious history. The how is equally precise. You must stop viewing your morning as a transition from sleep to work and start viewing it as a transition from spirit to form. By failing to consciously set the mold of the day, you allow the mold to be set by the entropy of the world. You must realize that your word is not merely a method of communication, it is a creative tool. In the physics of the soul, your word is the wand that solidifies the nebulous vapor of potential into the concrete reality of experience. You are not getting ready for the day. You are declaring the day into existence. In a city carved from white marble, there lived an old man who served as the keeper of the great lamp. The city was surrounded by a thick, perpetual fog that prevented the citizens from seeing the horizon. For decades, the people lived in fear, believing that the darkness outside was an invading force that would eventually consume their home. They lived in small, cramped houses, hoarding their meager supplies and spending every morning checking the walls for cracks, convinced that the structural integrity of their city was failing. The keeper, however, knew a secret. He climbed the highest tower every morning, not to light the lamp, to scare away the fog, but to remind the city of the sun. He understood that the lamp was not a weapon against the darkness. It was a beacon for the light that already existed above the clouds. One day, a young student climbed the tower and found the keeper sitting in the dark, his eyes closed, his hands open. "Master?" the student asked. "The city is trembling. The fog is thick, the supplies are low, and everyone is panicking about how we will survive the coming week. Why do you sit here in silence, instead of rallying the people to reinforce the walls?" The keeper smiled, not opening his eyes. "The people are fighting the fog because they believe the fog is the reality. They are reinforcing walls that only exist in their fear. If I go down there and argue with them about the walls, I merely validate that the walls are real. I must remain here, in this tower, and hold the vision of the sun. Because I hold it, the sun will eventually burn the fog away from the inside out." The student was confused. "But the people are starving. They need food, not visions." "They are starving," the keeper replied, "because they are spending their energy fighting shadows. They are so busy defending what they lack that they have forgotten how to claim what they have. Watch." The keeper whispered a single word into the silent air, a word of command. As he spoke, the fog outside the window began to thin, not because of a gust of wind, but because the frequency of the atmosphere had shifted. The student realized then that the keeper was not a laborer, not a warrior, and not a beggar. He was an architect of perception. He did not solve the problem. He redefined the reality in which the problem could no longer exist. The story of the keeper is your story. You are the occupant of the tower, and your mind is the beacon. The walls you are reinforcing, your debts, your anxieties, your strained relationships, are simply the shadows of a reality you have unconsciously permitted to exist. To integrate this today, you must treat your first 10 minutes of wakefulness as a sacred sanctuary. Before you touch your phone, before you utter a word to another soul, and before you allow a single thought of what must be done to enter your consciousness, you must make a decree. You must claim your status as the owner of your day. Begin by sitting in the silence of your room. Feel the weight of your body against the bed. Acknowledge that the breath entering your lungs is not something you earned. It is an unearned gift of the infinite. In this moment, you are not a seeker of good. You are the expression of good. If you find your mind wandering to the to-do list or the what-if scenarios, do not fight them. Simply acknowledge them as ghosts, as shadows with no substance, and return your focus to the stillness. You are the sovereign of your internal kingdom. When you step out of bed, you are not stepping into a world of chaos. You are stepping into a mold that you have prepared with your own intention. The fog of the world is waiting for your signal. It is a blank slate, a canvas awaiting the brushstroke of your conviction. You have reclaimed your space. You have silenced the noise. But now that the hallway of your mind is clear, we must address the most critical element of this transformation, the nature of the mold itself. If you are to build a life of abundance, you must understand why your current, subconscious shape is limiting the flow of the infinite and exactly how to recast your identity for the life you were born to live. The stage is set. The air is clear. The next chapter will reveal how to ensure that what you pour into your day is nothing less than the extraordinary. The transition begins now. Before the sun has breached the horizon, the world exists in a state of pre-dawn suspension, a cooling, liquid darkness that awaits the first strike of heat. Imagine, if you will, a vast, ancient foundry. It is silent, save for the rhythmic, steady drip of condensate from the rafters. This is the state of your mind in the minutes after waking, a grand, vaulted chamber filled with the molten potential of the coming day. Most individuals enter this foundry and, out of habit, immediately begin pouring their raw energy into jagged, rusted molds. They pour their consciousness into the molds of hurry, worry, and scarcity. They cast their morning in the shape of a frantic commute, the weight of an unpaid bill, or the phantom sting of a past disappointment. Because the iron of the spirit is fluid and responsive, it takes these shapes with perfect, tragic accuracy. By the time the world has fully risen, the individual is already trapped in the hardened iron of their own morning choices, unable to move, unable to change, convinced that the shape they occupy is the only shape that exists. But there is a different way to stand within the foundry. There is a way to look at the cold, dark molds of the old self and realize they have no power over the fire. You are not merely a worker in this space. You are the master founder. The temperature of the room, the quality of the light, and the shape of the cast are all yours to determine. The morning is not a vacuum of time to be consumed. It is a sacred chemical process. To master the alchemy of the morning is to recognize that you are currently tempering the steel of your own destiny. If you do not consciously choose the mold, you are, by default, consenting to the decay of the status quo. To master the alchemy of the morning, one must confront the profound, often uncomfortable truth of the law of non-resistance. The ego, in its desperate attempt to maintain a sense of control, believes that resistance is the same as strength. It believes that by fighting fear, by bracing against anxiety, and by wrestling with the how of its problems, it is achieving order. Why does the human mind default to this adversarial posture? Because the ego is a creature of definition. It defines itself by what it opposes. It says, I am the one who is against poverty, or I am the one who is against failure. In doing so, it creates a psychological tether to those very things. The more one pushes against a dark thought, the more energy one pours into the dark thought's existence. Like a shadow on a wall, the harder you strike it, the more you confirm its presence. How, then, does the master founder operate? By acknowledging the law of non-resistance. A principle that is not about passivity, but about the redirection of force. When a thought of lack enters the morning foundry, the master does not engage in a violent, internal war. To fight a fear is to feed it. It is to give your life force to the very thing you wish to eradicate. Instead, the master observes the thought, recognizes it as a remnant of a dissolving reality, and simply shows it the door. Why is this effective? Because thoughts require the sustenance of your attention to remain active. By observing a negative thought without emotional charge, by treating it as a transient guest rather than an invited occupant, you withdraw the life force that keeps it anchored. You stop the recursive feedback loop. The mind is a vacuum that abhors silence. If you cease to feed the old, habitual patterns, the vacuum will instinctively pull in the new, higher vibrational reality. You are not erasing the past. You are simply refusing to let it cast the mold for your future. The alchemy is complete when you understand that your primary labor is not to fix the world, but to clear the vessel so that the divine intelligence can pour itself into a new, expansive shape. In the high mountain kingdom of Athelgard, there lived a legendary gardener who was said to possess the secret to eternal abundance. While the rest of the kingdom suffered from drought and withered harvests, the gardener's plot was a riot of color, fruit, and life. The source of his water was the great alpine spring, an inexhaustible cascade of pure, mineral-rich ice melt that flowed directly from the mountain's peak. One summer, a traveler from the arid lowlands came to visit. He watched as the gardener labored, but he noticed something curious. The gardener spent no time fighting the earth, nor did he beg the clouds for rain. Instead, he spent hours walking the length of his irrigation lines, his eyes soft and his hands steady, searching for kinks. "Why do you focus on the hoses?" the traveler asked. Surely, the mountain spring is the miracle. If the spring is flowing, the water should reach the plants on its own. The gardener looked up, a calm smile touching his lips. The mountain provides the water, but the hose provides the direction. The spring is infinite, but if the hose is twisted, if there is a kink formed by yesterday's neglect, the water is held back. I do not fight the drought. I only clear the path for the water that is already there. The traveler looked at the plants and then at the hose. He saw a small, jagged fold in the rubber kink caused by a heavy stone that had been left in place for too long. The gardener reached down, gently lifted the stone, and smoothed the rubber. Instantly, the water surged forward, hissing through the pipe, bringing life to the furthest corner of the garden. You see, the gardener whispered, most people spend their lives screaming at the garden, demanding that it grow, while their own hoses are kinked with fear and doubt. They think the water is scarce because they cannot see it, but the water is never scarce. The supply is eternal. The only thing that exists is the obstruction of the mind. The traveler understood then that the kink was not the drought. The kink was the act of holding onto the stone of yesterday. The alchemy of your morning is the act of smoothing your hose. It is the moment you acknowledge that your supply is not dependent on the economy, your employer, or the outcome of a conversation. Your supply is as eternal and infinite as the mountain spring. To embody this today, practice the discipline of the gentle release. When you wake, and that first, familiar drop in your stomach arrives, that automatic scan for what is wrong, do not judge it. Do not attempt to wrestle it into submission. Instead, take a deep, grounded breath. Imagine your mind as the gardener's irrigation system. Recognize that the anxiety you feel is merely a kink, a momentary obstruction. With a single, silent decree, say, I release the burden of the how. My source is infinite, and my path is clear. Visualize those fears as gray mist, dissolving in the warmth of a new, rising sun. As you breathe, feel the pressure of the infinite supply moving through your awareness, unimpeded. You are not waiting for life to change. You are clearing the path for the life that is already flowing toward you. This is not a temporary boost. It is a permanent recalibration. But now that the hose is straight and the conduit is open, we must address the most potent, misunderstood tool in the alchemist's arsenal, the identity of the heir. You have cleared the path, but who is walking upon it? You have cleared the way for the flow, but a flow without a vessel is merely a puddle. To truly command your reality, you must understand why you are not a beggar waiting for bread, but a prince waiting for the keys to the kingdom. The bridge to the next chapter is built on a radical shift in perspective, a shift from the psychology of earning to the spiritual law of claiming. You have cleared the kinks. Now, it is time to assume the crown. The alchemy is not yet finished, for the heir is coming into his own. Imagine a vast, echoing chamber of alabaster and gold, where the air itself seems to vibrate with the hum of silent history. In the center of this room sits a throne of carved obsidian, its surface polished to such a high sheen that it reflects not the room, but the very essence of the one who gazes into it. This is the inner sanctum of your own consciousness. Now, observe the figure standing before this throne. He is dressed in the garments of a wayfarer, dust-covered, his shoulders stooped under the phantom weight of a heavy pack, his eyes darting toward the floor as if searching for stray coins. He stands in the presence of his own sovereignty, yet he behaves like a petitioner. He approaches the seat of his power with a trembling hand, whispering prayers of plea, asking for favor, asking for relief, asking for more. He acts as if the vault of the universe is locked, and he must beg a fickle gatekeeper for the keys. This is the central paradox of the unawakened soul. You stand in the very throne room of your life, authorized to command the elements, yet you persist in the posture of a beggar. You treat the infinite as a distant, hoarding deity, rather than the very breath in your lungs. You look at your bank account, your relationships, or your physical vitality, and you see only what is missing. You fail to realize that the throne is not occupied by another. It is empty, and it is waiting for your return. The kingdom is already yours, but the heir has been living in the servant's quarters, unaware that the parchment of his legitimacy is clutched in his own trembling, closed fist. To transcend the role of the beggar, one must engage in a brutal, necessary deconstruction of the belief system known as the earned reality. Why does the human spirit cling to the delusion that good must be earned through struggle? It is the residue of a survival-based society. From birth, we are conditioned by a system of rewards and punishments. Work harder, receive more. Fail to struggle, receive nothing. We transpose this earthly logic onto the divine. We mistakenly believe that the universe operates like a merchant, weighing our suffering on a scale and granting us grace only when the weight of our effort becomes sufficient. How does this psychological architecture trap us? It creates a subconscious loop of unworthiness. If you believe you must earn your good, then by definition, you admit that you do not yet possess it. The moment you state, "I am trying to get," you negate the law of manifestation, because you are affirming the present state of lack. You are telling the subconscious mind, "I am in a position of need," and the subconscious, with its relentless, literal efficiency, will ensure that you remain in a state of needing. Recursive thinking. How do we pivot from earning to inheriting? We must ask, what is an heir? An heir does not work for the inheritance. The inheritance is a byproduct of their identity. The legitimacy of the heir is not in what they do, but in who they are. To embody this, you must shift the locus of your authority. You are not a seeker, you are a claimant. The how of your life, the strategy, the timing, the physical manifestation is not your burden. That is the work of the divine intelligence, the architect that operates in the unseen, while you provide the identity that allows the blueprint to move into form. When you stop begging, you cease to be a supplicant and begin to be a sovereign. The shift is not in the material world. It is in the internal registration of your bloodline. You are not asking for the kingdom, you are remembering that you already hold the title. In the forgotten annals of the Eastern empires, there lived a young man named Calin. He had been orphaned in a border skirmish and raised by a band of nomadic traders. For 20 years, Calin moved from camp to camp, bartering his strength for scraps of bread, sleeping on the cold earth, and perpetually worrying about the arrival of winter. He was known for his humility, a trait that, in his case, was merely the mask of profound, internalized lack. One day, a royal envoy arrived at the camp, carrying a scroll sealed with the signet of the great king. The envoy sought the lost heir of the fallen province, a child who had been spirited away during the war. He read the genealogy, and the villagers one by one pointed to Calin. The envoy approached him, knelt in the dust, and presented the signet ring. Calin recoiled, his hands raised in defensive posture. "You have the wrong man," he stammered. "I have nothing. I am a trader of no standing. I have no land, no coin, and I have not even a horse to call my own." The envoy looked at him with a mixture of pity and steel. "You speak of what you possess in your pockets, boy. I speak of what is written in your blood. You've been walking across the land you own for 20 years, begging for passage on the roads your own ancestors paved." Calin was horrified. The thought of his own sovereignty was more terrifying than the poverty he had known, because it shattered the only identity he had ever built. He had become comfortable in his struggle. He knew how to be a beggar, he did not know how to be a king. He took the ring, not because he believed it, but because the envoy forced it upon him. When he placed it on his finger, something within him shifted. He did not suddenly become wealthy. The clothes on his back were still rags, and his stomach was still empty. But he stopped bowing. He walked through the camp, and for the first time, he did not look down at the ground to see if he would find a copper. He looked at the horizon to see how he would govern the land. The change was internal. The physical manifestation, the carriage, the palace, the wealth was not the cause of his royalty. It was merely the inevitable result of his walking with the posture of a king. The story of Kaylin is the story of your own potential. You have been walking the roads of your life, asking for crumbs, when the entire map of your domain has been yours from the start. The beggar is the version of you that believes he must prove his value to the universe before he can receive its bounty. The heir is the version of you that knows he is already worthy because he exists. To integrate this truth today, you must practice the posture of ownership. Throughout your day, whenever you feel the urge to chase a result, to worry if you are enough, or to feel anxious about the timeline of your success, stop. Feel the ring on your finger, the metaphorical signet of your divine birthright. Sit up straighter. Breathe with the confidence of one who knows the inheritance is secured. Speak your affirmations not as requests, but as decrees. You are not saying, "Please give me." You are saying, "I occupy." As you move through your day, ask yourself, how would the heir of the universe walk? Would he look at his bills with panic, or with the calm certainty of someone who knows the treasury is already open? Would she look at her challenges as obstacles, or as the territory she is destined to conquer? The shift is subtle, but the impact is absolute. By changing your internal posture, you signal to the universe that the time for testing is over, and the time for manifestation has begun. You have claimed your title. You have identified your source. But now, the question arises, if you are the heir, what is the precise nature of the law of preparation that dictates the physical arrival of your good? The foundation is laid. The beggar has been dismissed from the throne room. The heir is now ready to learn the rules of the kingdom. The bridge is crossed. The transformation is underway. Prepare yourself, for the next movement of this symphony is about to change everything you thought you knew about the relationship between your identity and your reality. Picture a stone hearth in the depths of a midwinter night. The frost has etched intricate, jagged patterns upon the window panes, and the air within the chamber is so brittle it seems to crack with every exhale. A man sits before a grand, ornate fireplace. He is shivering, his limbs pulled tight against his chest, his breath forming fleeting ghosts in the frigid air. He stares into the empty grate, his eyes filled with a desperate, frantic longing. He mutters to the stone, pleading for warmth. "Give me heat," he whispers. "I have need of the flame. I have been patient. I have been cold. I have suffered long enough. Bring me the fire." He waits, eyes fixed on the cold, dark soot, expecting a miracle. He waits for the embers to spontaneously ignite, for the smoke to rise from nothing, for the heat to manifest in response to his suffering. But the fireplace remains cold. The logs, lying unused and dry in the corner, remain dormant. He is a man begging for the sun while refusing to step out of the shadows. He is a man dying of cold while holding the matches in his own pocket. This is the central paradox of the unmanifested life, the belief that the physical world is the cause of our experience rather than the effect. We stand before the fireplace of our lives, demanding the warmth of success, the fire of love, or the light of abundance, while failing to provide the only thing that can bridge the gap between cold and burning, the wood. The wood, in the theater of your reality, is your identity. You are waiting for the world to change before you choose to change your internal state, not realizing that the world is merely the reflection of the wood you have already placed in the fire. To grasp the law of preparation, one must undergo a fundamental shift in their comprehension of causality. Why is it that the physical world so stubbornly refuses to yield until the internal shift is absolute? The answer lies in the nature of identity-aligned resonance. Reality is not a static environment. It is a dynamic vibrational response system. It mirrors not what you desire, but what you are. If you wait for the evidence of wealth to feel abundant, you are effectively tethered to the frequency of lack. You are telling the universe, "I am a person who does not have." Because reality is a faithful mirror, it cannot help but provide you with more of the not having. Recursive thinking. How do we bypass this loop? We ask, what must be true before the physical manifestation occurs? The truth is that the manifestation is already complete in the realm of spirit. The law of preparation dictates that you must behave as the person who already possesses the thing. This is not acting in the sense of a charade. It is aligning in the sense of a transformation. How does this function on a psychological level? It requires a total surrender of the how. When you are anchored in the identity of the person who has the desired outcome, your neurobiology shifts. You cease to scan for threats, the lack, and begin to perceive opportunities, the supply. You move with the poise of one whose victory is already decided. The hesitation disappears, replaced by the calm, measured action of an heir. The why is simple. The universe cannot manifest a reality that contradicts your core identity. Therefore, you must become the reality you seek to inhabit. You must provide the wood. You must provide the belief. You must provide the identity. Without the fuel of your conviction, the fire of manifestation has no medium through which to burn. You are the catalyst, the spark, and the timber all at once. In the bustling, high-stakes marketplace of a fabled desert city, there lived a merchant whose coffers had been empty for a year. The drought had crippled trade, and the creditors were circling his house like hawks. His peers were gathering in the squares, wailing about the end of the market and the harshness of the divine. They spent their days clutching their robes, whispering of impending ruin. This merchant, however, did something that struck his rivals as madness. He took the very last of his silver sum that could have bought him a month of meager flour and walked into the shop of the most renowned silkweaver in the city. He purchased a bolt of rare, imperial violet silk, a luxury that served no immediate survival purpose. His neighbors were aghast. "You have doomed yourself," they cried. "You have traded your last bread for vanity. How will you eat now?" The merchant looked at them with a steady, quiet gaze. "I am not buying silk," he replied. "I am buying a state of being. My coffers are empty, and if I continue to act like a man who has no silver, I will continue to attract the reality of poverty. I am purchasing this cloth to remind my soul that I am a man of abundance. I am placing the wood in the fireplace, even before I see the spark." He did not sell the silk. He draped it over a table in his shop, a vibrant royal anchor in a room of gloom. He walked as if he were still a titan of trade, his head held high, his tone confident, his heart light. He began to plan his next venture, not from a place of desperation, but from the perspective of a man who had the capital to execute it. Within a week, a traveler from the east entered the shop, drawn not by the silk, but by the aura of the man who stood beside it. The traveler sought a partner who was not broken, someone who still possessed the fire of ambition. He offered the merchant a contract that dwarfed his previous holdings. The merchant had provided the wood the identity, and the fire had found its way to him. He did not chase the contract. He positioned himself as the vessel for it. The merchant's secret is the secret of the sovereign heir. You do not wait for the outer world to show you proof before you allow yourself to inhabit the version of you that has succeeded. You provide the evidence of your own worthiness through your demeanor, your choices, and your internal dialogue. To embody this today, identify one area where you are waiting for the fireplace to light itself. Is it in your career? Your health? Your connection to the divine? Perform a symbolic preparation. It does not need to be a grand purchase. It can be an internal act. If you desire a life of clarity, clear your desk. If you desire a life of love, act as if you are already held. Carry yourself with the quiet, unshakable confidence of one who knows the outcome is already written. When the doubt of the world calls to you, stand your ground. You are not waiting for the world to confirm your status. You are confirming it for the world. Like this message, if you choose to become the living, breathing, and walking proof of your own success, rather than waiting for the world to grant you permission. You have learned to clear the conduit and to assume the mantle of the air. You have learned that the fire requires your own wood. But there is a final, vital step in this creative process, a step that bridges the gap between the thought and the physical reality. You have the wood, you have the hearth, and you have the vision. Now, you must learn to speak the words that command the flame into existence. Subscribe to this master series. In our next chapter, we will open the vault of the vibrational wand. You will learn the exact sequence of commands that will signal to your subconscious mind that your reality is not becoming, it is already done. The stage is set, the wood is placed, the stillness of the room is heavy with the potential of what is to come. You are not the man shivering in the cold. You are the architect of the flame. The transition to the final creative act is at hand. Do not look back at the cold. The light is already beginning to glow. The universe does not speak in syllables. It speaks in frequencies. In the deepest silence of the pre-dawn, before the sun has breached the horizon, the air is not empty. It is a vast, unrippled pond of potentiality, waiting for the stone to be cast. Imagine standing in a colossal, cathedral-like chamber, carved from the very fabric of space and time. You are the sole inhabitant, and the silence here is not the absence of sound, but the presence of infinite, unformed energy. You stand before an altar of light, and in your hand, you hold the wand, a simple, elegant rod of crystallized intent. Most souls walk through this chamber with their mouths shut and their spirits muted, terrified of the echo they might create. They treat the atmosphere as a heavy, immovable weight, an oppressor that dictates the terms of their existence. They do not realize that the moment they draw breath, they are already vibrating. The paradox of the human experience is this: we are terrified of our own voice. Yet we are constantly murmuring our reality into existence. We walk through our days unconsciously chanting the litany of our fears, unknowingly weaving the very cages that confine us. But here, in this sacred, cinematic stillness, you are invited to recognize the truth. The air around you is not a void. It is a canvas of conductive fluid. The vibration of your voice is the brush, and the pitch of your conviction is the pigment. You are not merely a passenger in this life. You are the symphony's conductor, and the baton is already trembling in your grip. It is time to let the first note ring out, not as a desperate plea to a distant god, but as a command to the very foundations of the world. To understand the mechanics of the vibrational wand, one must peel back the layers of reality until the metaphysical scaffolding is revealed. The core principle that the vibration of the voice is the creative force of the universe is often dismissed as poetic idealism. However, when we apply the method of recursive thinking, the truth becomes an inescapable psychological imperative. Why does the spoken word possess the power to alter external reality? Because human consciousness is not a sequestered island. It is an integrated node within a universal neural network. When a thought remains unspoken, it is merely a flickering impulse in the prefrontal cortex. It lacks the coherence of physical manifestation. However, when that thought is channeled through the vibration of the vocal cords, it undergoes a transformation. The internal frequency becomes an external wave. The body, acting as a transducer, converts mental intent into kinetic energy, pushing sound waves out into the environment. How does this affect the subconscious mind? The subconscious, the great builder of your life, is a literalist. It does not possess a sense of humor, nor does it discern between past, present, or future. It listens only to the cadence of your internal and external dialogue. If the voice speaks of lack, I hope for, I wish, the subconscious registers these as the current state of your existence. It perceives your lack of resources as a foundational truth and sets about reinforcing it. It is a feedback loop of tragic proportions. The more you voice your struggle, the more the subconscious maps that struggle into your day-to-day path. To break this, One must move from descriptive language to prescriptive language. Recursive thinking reveals that the how of our reality is merely a reflection of the what of our declarations. If you are struggling with the question, how will I survive this month? You are anchoring your reality to the state of survival. By shifting the declaration to, I have inexhaustible supply, you are overriding the previous loop. You are not talking to the universe, you are talking as the universe. You are providing the blueprint upon which the subconscious must inevitably build, for it has no other instructions. You are not begging for a shift. You are the shifting force itself. In a kingdom nestled between two obsidian peaks, there lived a weaver named Elara. Her loom was said to be enchanted, not because of the wood from which it was carved, but because of the thread it demanded. It was not made of wool or silk, but of light. For years, Elara lived in a state of perpetual melancholy, believing she was cursed to weave only gray, brittle garments. Her village was cold, her pantry was often bare, and her days were spent in the frantic, exhausting labor of trying to mend tears in the fabric of her own life. She would approach her loom every morning and weep. I am tired, she would whisper, and the threads of light would turn the color of ash. I am struggling, she would lament, and the warp of her tapestry would become jagged and thin. She believed the loom was broken, that the gods of the mountain had sent her faulty materials. One day, an elder, a traveler whose eyes held the depth of the night sky, watched her at work. He did not offer her gold, nor did he fix her loom. He simply stood behind her and said, "The loom does not create the pattern, Elara. The loom only follows the rhythm of your humming." Elara looked at him in confusion. "I have been weeping. I have been pleading. Why does the fabric not improve?" "Because," the elder replied, "the universe is a mirror that reflects the sound of your conviction. You have been singing a dirge, and so the world has become a funeral. Sing the song of the mountain before it has even risen. Sing of the golden threads." Elara hesitated, but the exhaustion of her misery outweighed her fear of the unknown. She closed her eyes, ignored the empty pantry, and ignored the cold air biting at her skin. She began to hum a deep, resonant sound that vibrated in her chest. She spoke into the light. "I have the abundance of the mountain. My storehouse is full. My threads are gold." The first hour, nothing changed. The second hour, the air grew still. But by the third hour, the light passing through the loom began to shift. The ash-gray threads turned into shimmering strands of amber and silk. She did not look at the pantry to see if it was full. She did not look at the door to see if a merchant had arrived. She simply kept singing, keep commanding. By the time the sun set, the weaver's chamber was glowing with the warmth of 1,000 hearths. She had not gone out to find the supply. She had positioned her voice, and the supply had been drawn to her, seeking the frequency it recognized as home. The vibrational wand is not a tool you pick up and put down. It is the natural state of your sovereign self. To embody this today, you must treat your speech as if it were carved in stone the moment it leaves your lips. For the remainder of this day, watch the frequency of your sentences. When a doubt arises, and it will, for the old mold still has residue, do not fight it with heavy, labored effort. Instead, meet the doubt with the swift, authoritative strike of your wand. If the thought says, "I cannot afford this," you will immediately pivot and speak, "I have inexhaustible divine supply flowing through every channel of my life." Do not look for the money in the bank. Look for the conviction in your heart. You are not manifesting for the future. You are aligning with a truth that already exists in the eternal present. This is the alchemy of the heir. You cease to track the movement of the physical world, for you know that the physical is merely the lagging shadow of your internal decree. You are now the master of your internal hallway, and every word you speak is a stone laid in the foundation of your new reality. But even as you begin to command the abundance in the identity, a deeper question remains. You have claimed your worth, and you have commanded your supply, But how do you maintain this posture when the world insists on showing you its lack? How do you remain the master when the clock, the bank, and the cynics tell you that you are dreaming? In the next chapter, we shall explore the anatomy of worthiness, the secret to why the heir never pleads, never apologizes, and never doubts their place in the kingdom. The bridge is formed. You are stepping across it now. Are you prepared to discover why you are not just a participant, but a necessity? Imagine a vast, sun-drenched throne room, the architecture of which defies the geometry of the mortal world. You stand in the center, and before you lies a crown not of gold or jewels, but of pure, luminous intent. It is light enough to be held by a child, yet it carries the gravitational weight of 1,000 star systems. This is the crown of the heir. For most of your life, you have hovered near the periphery of this room, glancing at the crown with a mixture of reverence and paralyzing terror. You have convinced yourself that you are not tall enough, or wise enough, or pure enough to place it upon your brow. You wait for an invitation, a celestial herald to announce your lineage, or a scroll of validation signed by the forces of the universe. But here is the paradox that arrests the heart. The crown is not bestowed. It is occupied. The throne is not awaiting a candidate. It is awaiting a presence. You have spent decades polishing the floor of the throne room, convinced that if you are humble enough, if you suffer enough, if you prove your worth through the grueling labor of struggle, the universe will finally deem you worthy of the seat. Yet, the silence of the hall remains unbroken by your own footsteps. You have mistaken the feeling of being ready for the act of being. You are waiting to become something that you already are, and in that waiting, you deny the very gravity of your own existence. The air here is thin, charged with the electricity of potential. It is time to stop looking at the crown and start feeling the weight of it upon your head. To understand the anatomy of worthiness, one must engage in a rigorous excavation of the psychological architecture we call the beggar's mind. Why does the human psyche gravitate toward the feeling of unworthiness? And how does this state of consciousness act as a self-fulfilling prophecy of limitation? The why is rooted in the survival-based evolutionary wiring of the ego. For millennia, human survival depended on social cohesion, on the approval of the tribe, the hierarchy, and the scarcity of resources. Consequently, the ego learned that worth is something earned through utility and compliance. If one performs well, one is fed. If one fails, one is cast out. We have internalized this primitive social contract and projected it onto the infinite. We treat the source of all creation as if it were a fickle tribal elder, demanding that we justify our existence through guilt, apology, and the performance of effort. Recursive thinking forces us to challenge this. If the source is truly infinite, then how could there be a hierarchy of worthiness? The answer is both simple and shattering. There is none. Worthiness is not a quality you acquire. It is a fundamental property of your existence. You are a divine necessity. You are not a mistake that the universe is trying to correct. You are a specific, non-replicable expression of the infinite. To believe you are unworthy is to imply that the source made a calculation error, that you are a glitch in the grand design. The how of shifting this identity requires a radical psychological inversion. We must stop viewing our life as a quest to earn, and start viewing it as an inheritance to claim. The beggar's mind operates on the frequency of I need, which is a confession of lack. The heir's mind operates on the frequency of I have, which is a statement of fact. When you apologize for your desires, when you hesitate to claim your space, you are essentially telling the universe that you have no business here. You are signaling to the subconscious that you are an intruder. But when you move with the quiet, unshakable confidence of one who knows the deed to the kingdom is already in their name, the subconscious must reorganize its perceptions. It stops looking for evidence of your struggle and begins delivering evidence of your sovereignty. You are not worthy because you have achieved. You have achieved because you are worthy. In the Chronicles of the Ancients, it is written of a young prince who was spirited away at birth during a great storm. He was raised by a kindly, humble gardener in the farthest, most desolate province of the realm. He grew up tending the soil, wearing the coarse linens of a laborer, and never once suspecting his bloodline. He was a good worker, yet he lived in constant, gnawing anxiety. He lived in terror of the harvest season, fearing that if the crop was small, he would be cast out into the wilderness. He spent his days measuring his worth by the size of the fruit he gathered, and his nights in prayer, begging the rain to fall so he might be worthy of his master's continued favor. One spring, a royal envoy arrived at the orchard. He bore a golden seal, the sight of which caused the gardener to tremble and kneel in the dust. The envoy looked past the master of the garden and walked directly to the young laborer, whose hands were stained with dirt and whose brow was damp with sweat. The envoy did not look at his calloused hands or his humble clothes. He looked into his eyes and spoke a single, immutable truth. The kingdom has found you. The crown is yours, and the harvest you have been tending has always belonged to you. The prince, for he was indeed, the prince did not suddenly grow taller. He did not magically acquire royal robes. But in that moment, the anatomy of his heart shifted. He looked at the orchard not as a burden to be tended, but as an estate to be inherited. He did not stop working, but his work was no longer a frantic plea for survival. He worked with the poise of an owner. He walked through the rows with the steady, unhurried stride of a man who knows that no matter how the weather turns, he is the master of the land. The harvest was already his. The labor was merely the physical expression of his stewardship. He had ceased to beg for his life. He had begun to live it. To embody this truth today, you must identify where you are still living like the prince who didn't know his name. Where do you find yourself apologizing for your potential? Where do you feel you must work to convince the universe of your value? Begin by stripping away the servant language from your inner monologue. Stop saying, "I am trying to get," or "I hope I am good enough." Replace these with the radical declaration, "I am worthy because I exist. I have inherited the capacity for this dream." This is not an act of arrogance. It is an act of spiritual alignment. Arrogance implies a separation from others. Sovereignty recognizes that you have a place in the order of things that only you can fill. When you walk through your day, act as if the kingdom is already yours. Carry yourself with the grace of the air. Even if your bank account reflects a temporary winter, speak and act as if you are managing a vast summer harvest. This shift is the ultimate separator. Most people will continue to fight for their worth, exhausting their life force in the pursuit of external validation. You, however, are now grounded in the reality that you are a divine necessity. You have claimed your place. But as you stand in this new, sovereign posture, you may find that the world that is used to seeing you as a servant begins to test your resolve. It will present obstacles not as punishments, but as the final locks on the gates you are ready to open. You have claimed your identity. You have set your command. But now you must learn to navigate the very fabric of time itself. You have mastered the who and the what, but have you mastered the when? We have arrived at the threshold of the most misunderstood law of all, divine timing. You have prepared the soil and planted the seed, but do you have the patience to let the universe do its work without checking the roots every hour? The seventh gate awaits, and with it, the secret to the stillness that conquers time. You are closer than you have ever been. The coronation is not in the future, it is in the way you breathe this very second. In the deepest recesses of the cosmic workshop, there exists a clock of impossible complexity. Its gears are forged from the silence between heartbeats, and its pendulum swings across the infinite expanse of the now. Watch it closely, and you will witness a singular, maddening paradox. The gears move with breathtaking speed, yet the hands of the clock appear to be perfectly, eternally still. This is the nature of divine order of velocity, so perfect, so synchronized with the movement of the universe that it registers to the human eye as absolute calm. You, standing before the chaos of your own life, view this movement through the lens of anxiety. You see the scattered pieces of your existence, the unpaid debts, the delayed dreams, the doors that remain firmly shut, and you cry out, "I am too late," or "it has not arrived in time." You are like a man standing on the platform of a train station, shouting at the wind because the locomotive has not yet pierced the horizon. You believe that time is a predator, a ticking countdown that diminishes your opportunity with every passing second. You do not see that the train is already traveling at the speed of your conviction. You are the architect of your own delay, not because you are failing to work, but because you are failing to wait with the authority of an owner. The atmosphere in this chapter is one of crystalline stillness. It is the moment you stop fighting the clock and begin to recognize that you are the one who set the gears in motion. To master the shield of divine order, one must fundamentally dismantle the obsession with how and when. These are the two phantom limbs of the ego ghosts of a past that no longer exists and a future that has yet to manifest. Why does the ego obsess over the how and the when? The ego is fundamentally insecure because it believes itself to be separate from the source. It views itself as a lone laborer in a hostile landscape, convinced that it must manage the logistics of reality. Therefore, it demands to know the route, the how, and the arrival time, the when, to feel a semblance of control. By asking these questions, the ego is inadvertently admitting that it does not trust the source to provide. It is trying to force a result through the narrow channel of linear, physical effort. How does this fixation break the law of manifestation? Every time you demand to know how your good will arrive, you are placing a ceiling on the infinite. You are telling the universe that your imagination is the limit of its possibilities. When you obsess over the when, you are signaling a lack of faith, which causes the subconscious to lock into a state of waiting. Waiting is a frequency of separation. To wait is to imply that the goal is elsewhere. The law of divine order dictates that the supply and the demand are created simultaneously. The moment the desire arises, the resolution is already present in the energetic field. To overcome this, one must move into the state of total poise. This is not passivity. It is the high-level activity of alignment. You must accept that divine intelligence is never late. It does not operate on the frantic clock of the human world, but on the precise, unwavering rhythm of grace. The shield of which we speak is your detachment from the mechanics of the event. When you stop monitoring the progress of your miracle, you stop interrupting the flow. You allow the divine architect to work without the meddling of your anxious, fearful thoughts. The how is not your concern, that is the work of the universe. Your only work is to occupy the identity of the one who has already received. In a coastal city beset by treacherous, swirling tides, there lived an architect renowned for building bridges that would stand for 1,000 years. His secret was not in the strength of the stone, but in his method. While other builders rushed to lay foundations into the churning water, causing their structures to crumble under the relentless shifting of the sea, this master builder would stand on the shore for weeks. He would observe the currents, the moon, and the subtle shifts in the seabed. He was often mocked by the townspeople, who labeled him lazy. "The bridge is needed now," they would shout. "Why do you stand there doing nothing?" The architect would merely smile and adjust his compass. He was not waiting for the sea to become calm. He was waiting for the exact moment when the tide would naturally recede to reveal the bedrock. He was aligning his labor with the natural rhythm of the earth. When the tide finally turned, he walked out onto the exposed stone, which had been invisible to everyone else, and set his first column with a single, precise strike of his mallet. The bridge was completed in a fraction of the time it took the others, and it stood immutable against every storm that followed. The townspeople marveled, asking him, "How did you know the tide would turn exactly then?" The architect replied, "I did not make the tide turn. I simply refused to build until the truth of the foundation was revealed. My work was not the building. My work was the stillness that allowed me to see the path." He had protected his work with a shield of patience, refusing to let the chaos of the water dictate the timing of his craft. He was the master of the clock, not its servant. To integrate the shield of divine order into your day, you must cultivate the art of quiet anticipation. Throughout this day, when the temptation arises to look for evidence of your progress, to check the bank account, to obsess over the reply of an email, to wonder why a door has not opened, you must recognize this impulse as an attempt to dig up the seed. Replace the frantic energy of how with the mantra of the heir, "I have perfect timing working on my behalf. I am never too late and never too early." When the world presents an obstacle, do not see it as a no. See it as a redirection, or perhaps as a sign that the tide is currently receding to reveal a firmer foundation. Protect your peace by refusing to entertain not yet thoughts. If doubt attempts to infiltrate your mental sanctuary, invoke the shield. Visualize a shimmering invisible wall around your life, your home, and your peace, behind which the divine intelligence is constructing your reality in total secrecy. This is the transition from a life of frantic, exhausting labor to a life of sovereign, aligned flow. You are no longer chasing the outcome. You are positioning yourself to receive it. But there is a final layer to this transformation. You have spoken, you have identified as the owner, and you have protected your order. But what happens when the miracle arrives? Many are equipped to handle the struggle, but few are prepared for the magnitude of the success. We are nearing the conclusion of this journey, where we shall discuss the science of gratitude not as a polite thank you, but as the final, irreversible seal on your manifestation. If you feel the weight of this new authority settling into your shoulders, if you recognize that your peace is worth more than any piece of evidence the world can offer, take a breath, feel the truth of it, and hit the like button. Let this be a signal to your subconscious that you are no longer the one who chases, but the one who attracts. Subscribe to this channel and remain in the command. The shield is raised, the borders are sealed, and the divine movement has begun. You have moved beyond the need to know the path, for you are now walking in the certainty of the destination. The seventh gate is locked behind you. What lies ahead is the culmination of your decree. Are you ready to witness the manifestation of the done deal? Picture a grand, vaulted hall at the twilight hour. The air is thick with the scent of burning frankincense and the cooling stone of ancient masonry. In the center of the hall, a sculptor stands before a block of raw, unyielding marble. He has been here for days, his chisel a blur, his focus absolute. But as the final light of the sun streaks through the high, arched windows, he does not put the chisel to the stone. He steps back, drops his tools, and falls to his knees, not to ask for more time, not to plead for strength, but to offer a profound, silent bow of thanks. To an observer passing by, this is a profound paradox. The block remains, to all outward appearances, an unshaped, rugged mass. There is no statue yet visible to the naked eye, and yet the sculptor weeps with gratitude. Why? Because in the realm of his own creative consciousness, the masterpiece is already complete. He has seen it in the silence. He has felt the curve of the marble in his mind's eye. He has already lived the moment of its unveiling. He is not thanking the universe for what he hopes to do. He is thanking the universe for what he has already done. Most souls spend their lives clawing at the stone, cursing the hardness of the marble, and begging for a breakthrough, never realizing that the masterpiece is only released through the vibration of gratitude for a result that has already occurred in the infinite. To understand the science of gratitude, one must strip away the pedestrian definition of the word. In the common tongue, gratitude is a polite social grace, a thank you rendered for a favor received. In the metaphysical realm, however, gratitude is the highest form of creative physics. It is the final, irreversible seal placed upon the act of manifestation. Why is gratitude the most powerful creative force? Gratitude is the only state of being that necessitates the presence of the desired outcome. You cannot be truly, vibrationally grateful for something that you believe is missing. When you express gratitude for a thing as if it is already in your possession, you are effectively collapsing the wave of probability. You are asserting that the delay between thought and form is an illusion. You are anchoring your reality in the eternal now, where all things are already fulfilled. How does the recursive logic of gratitude rewrite the subconscious? When the subconscious hears you say, "I am grateful for my prosperity," it enters a state of cognitive resolution. It no longer needs to hunt for the evidence of lack. The evidence is no longer necessary. The subconscious mind accepts the feeling of gratitude as the ultimate proof that the goal has been achieved. If you were truly lacking, you could not, by definition, be in a state of genuine gratitude. Therefore, by generating the feeling of gratitude, you are tricking the subconscious into believing that the goal is a past event. The mechanism works in a profound, recursive loop. 1. The recognition. You acknowledge the desire. 2. The decree. You speak the command of "I have." 3. The seal. You offer gratitude for the manifestation. By offering this thanks, you close the circuit. You stop the internal dialogue of searching or wanting, which are frequencies of absence. You effectively stop digging up the seed. If you plant a seed in the garden of your mind and then, an hour later, dig it up to see if it has sprouted roots, you kill the process. Gratitude is the soil capping ritual. It says, "The work is done. The seed is planted. It is not my business to watch the soil. It is my business to enjoy the harvest that is inevitable." In the bustling trade ports of a bygone era, there was a merchant who had fallen into ruinous debt. His ships had not returned, his coffers were empty, and his name had become synonymous with failure. Every morning, he would wake up, walk to his heavy iron-bound ledger, and tally his debts with trembling hands. His despair grew with every entry, his gratitude non-existent, for he saw only the subtraction of his life force. A mystic visited him one evening and, seeing the ledger of despair, threw it into the harbor. "You are tracking the wrong currency," the mystic said. "You are tracking the debt. Start a new ledger and call it the Book of Manifestations." The merchant, desperate, took a fresh, pristine book. The mystic instructed him, "Every morning, write down what you wish to see as if you have already received it, and at the end of every entry, write, 'I give thanks that this is now manifested in divine order.'" The merchant began to write, "I have received the cargo of the silver fleet. I give thanks that it is manifested." At first, he felt foolish. His room was still cold, his debt was still owed. But he persisted. He stopped looking at the harbor for the ships. He stopped asking his neighbors if there was news. He simply treated his book as the final record of a historical fact. He began to walk with the lightness of a wealthy man, smiling at the creditors, as if he were simply awaiting his accountant to clear the final details. 2 weeks later, a messenger arrived. A ship, long thought lost in a tempest, had been blown into a distant, uncharted port where its cargo of spice and silk had doubled in value. It was returning, laden with more than he had ever dared to imagine. The merchant's success was not born of his physical labor in the final 2 weeks. It was born of his transition from the ledger of debt to the book of manifestation. He had ceased to track the problem and had begun to live within the gratitude of the solution. To integrate this science into your life, you must cease the checking. This is the most difficult stage of the work for the modern mind. We are addicted to proof. We want to see the progress bars, the notification pings, the tangible shifts. But to be the master, you must abandon the role of the inspector. Today, take a moment to identify one specific desire, be it financial, relational, or internal, and write it down or speak it into the silence. Then, explicitly state, "I give thanks that this is now manifested." From this point forward, do not ask, "When will it appear?" When the doubt surfaces, do not fight it. Simply smile, and remember, the sculptor does not ask the stone why it hasn't turned into a statue yet. He knows the statue is within. He is simply waiting for the chips to fall away. Your poise is your proof. When you walk through your day with an unshakable, quiet confidence, you are signaling to the universe that you are not a beggar waiting for a crust, but a master overseeing a kingdom. You have reached the point where the inner world and the outer world are no longer two separate things. They are becoming one. But, as the transition gains momentum, you may notice something unsettling. As you turn the wheel of your life toward this new horizon, the old structures, your habits, your social circles, the very way you see yourself will feel the strain of the change. The ship must break its path through the old, stagnant waters to reach the open sea. You are nearing the final phase of this transformation, where we shall discuss the navigator's wheel, how to steer through the final, turbulent wake of your old life to reach the silent, sovereign destination that awaits. You are not just changing your day, you are changing your trajectory. Are you prepared to let go of the rudder of the past to hold the wheel of your future? The sea is a vast, unblinking eye, reflecting the infinite charcoal expanse of the midnight sky. You are the navigator on a vessel of immense proportions, a ship built not of steel, but of your own history, your habits, your fears, and your long-held definitions of self. This vessel has been sailing a specific heading for years, its hull encrusted with the barnacles of past failures and the heavy, rusted chains of old, inherited beliefs. Now, imagine the moment the command is given. You place your hands upon the great mahogany wheel, and, with a surge of sovereign resolve, you turn it. The wood groans. The gears beneath the deck shriek in protest. You have pointed the bow toward a new horizon, a destination of abundance and light. Yet, here is the paradox that tests the soul. The ship does not immediately veer into the new path. It continues, for a time, to plow forward in its old, familiar wake. The water churns, the momentum of the past insists on its trajectory, and the ship seems stubbornly bound to the course you have just rejected. Most navigators, seeing that the ship still points toward the old horizon, panic. They assume the wheel has snapped, or that the vessel is beyond control, and they rush to correct, to force, to steer frantically in a dozen directions. They do not realize that the moment the wheel turned, the destination changed. The ship is merely navigating the physics of its own momentum. The navigator's wheel is the exercise of absolute faith in the turn you have already made. To grasp the nature of transformation, one must understand the psychological physics of inertia. The mind, much like the great vessel, is governed by the laws of repetition. Why does the external world seem to resist the internal shift? The external world is a temporal construct. It is the wake left behind by your previous thoughts. It possesses a phenomenon we might call reverberation lag. When you change your internal frequency, you are essentially initiating a new causal sequence. However, the physical world is still processing the energetic output of your previous declarations. When you experience a delay between your internal command and the physical manifestation, you are not witnessing a failure of the law. You are witnessing the movement of the wake. How do we navigate this lag without losing our footing? Recursive thinking reveals that the primary obstacle to manifestation is the checking habit. We check the outer world for evidence of our new internal state. Why do we check? Because we equate seeing with believing. We believe that if we cannot touch it, it is not there. How do we transcend this? By understanding that true transformation is an act of inward verification. When you turn the wheel, you must adopt the psychology of the pre-filmed life. Consider the film reel of your existence. The scenes currently playing on your screen, the problems, the limitations, the smallness were filmed by your past consciousness. They are the playback of an old script. If you were to walk into a cinema and see a scene of sorrow, you would not stand up and scream at the screen, nor would you assume the entire movie is a tragedy. You would know that the ending is already written, already filmed, and already set in the reel. You are simply watching the playback of the moments before the resolution. To steer is to remain seated, watching the playback with the calm of one who knows the climax of the story is guaranteed. You do not stop the movie. You do not fight the screen. You simply wait for the reel to advance to the scene where your declaration becomes your reality. In the high mountains of the north, there lived a cartographer who spent his life mapping the treacherous, jagged passes of the range. He was famous for his accuracy, yet he was also famous for his misery. His maps always led travelers into the most difficult terrain. He believed that the mountains were naturally cruel, and his life was a testament to the belief that the path must be hard to be legitimate. One day, he met a hermit who lived in a cave near the summit. The hermit was not a mapmaker, but a man who had walked every inch of the range without ever leaving a footprint of struggle. Your maps are accurate, the hermit observed, but they are maps of the past. You are charting the route based on where you have walked, not where you intend to go. I only chart what I see, the cartographer replied defensively. That is the mistake of the navigator, the hermit said. You see the mountains, you do not see the passages between them. If you continue to map only the struggle, you will only ever lead yourself into the struggle. The hermit took the cartographer's quill, and over a blank parchment drew not the mountains, but the destination, the valley of sunlight, on the other side of the range. Do not map the rocks you have already hit, the hermit commanded. Map the path of the sun. The geography of the world will rearrange itself to accommodate the man who refuses to look at the shadows. The cartographer, terrified, began to draw the new path. For weeks, he walked through the very mountains he had once feared, but he refused to look at the steep inclines. He focused entirely on the image of the sunny valley in his mind. He walked over terrain that should have been impassable, yet miraculously, he found hidden caves, gentle slopes, and dried-up riverbeds that offered him passage. He hadn't changed the mountains. He had changed the navigation. He had aligned himself with a path that existed, but which his eyes had previously been too focused on the problem to see. He had navigated the wheel of his own mind, and the mountain had no choice but to show him the way. The integration of this truth requires a shift in your daily posture. You must stop being the observer of your problems and start being the navigator of your destination. Today, when you encounter the lag, the moment where your current reality does not match your internal command, do not panic. Do not attempt to correct the wheel by returning to your old, fearful habits. Practice the pre-film view. When you see a situation that triggers doubt, say to yourself, "This is a scene from an old reel. It is the playback of my former self. I am no longer that person." View your current circumstances as the tail end of a finished, expiring contract. You are simply serving out the final, mandatory days of an old agreement while your new reality prepares its entrance. If you maintain this perspective, you will find that the inertia of your life begins to dissipate. Doors will open in the most unexpected places. People will arrive with the missing pieces you required. The mountains in your path will become mere footnotes to the journey. You are no longer fighting the current, you are sailing upon it. But there is a finality to this movement. You have turned the wheel, you have mapped the path, and you have held your position against the inertia of the past. You are now entering the final, sovereign space of your transformation. The game of life is not won by those who struggle the longest, but by those who speak the final word. In our concluding chapter, we shall walk together into the sovereign departure, the moment of absolute, unshakable alignment, where the inner and outer become one, and the ritual of the morning air becomes the lived reality of the day. You are the architect, the navigator, and now you are the proof. The bridge is behind you. There is no turning back. Are you prepared to step off the ship and into the reality you have commanded? The horizon does not merely exist. It is an invitation. As the last remnants of the night's shadows dissolve into the amber glow of a rising sun, you stand upon the precipice of the world you have built within the silent chambers of your mind. For 10 chapters, you have been a ghost in your own life, observing, analyzing, and rearranging the furniture of your soul. But now, the air has changed. The pressure has lifted. You stand before the final gate, a structure of light and intention, built not of brick or mortar, but of the unwavering, immutable commands you have spoken into the ether. There is a profound, breathtaking paradox here. You have been searching for a kingdom that was always beneath your feet. You spent your life looking for a key, forgetting that you were the one who held the lock. As the sun hits your face, the warmth is not merely solar radiation. It is the physical manifestation of your own inner fire, reflecting back at you. You have stopped being a petitioner. You have become the presence. The struggle that once defined your morning has evaporated, replaced by a stillness so deep it creates its own weather. You are not stepping into a new day. You are stepping into a new reality that has been waiting for your arrival with the patience of a god. The path forward is no longer a map to be followed. It is a path being paved by the very rhythm of your heartbeat. To achieve the sovereign departure, the total unification of the inner command and the outer life, one must discard the last remaining garment of the ego, the need for separation. Why is the sovereign departure the final stage of manifestation? Throughout this journey, there remained a subtle duality: I, the seeker, and it, the desired manifestation. We treated the universe as a mechanism to be operated, but recursive thinking reveals a more profound truth. There is no separation between the architect and the structure. The why behind our previous struggles was a belief in distance, a belief that we were here and our good was over there, requiring time and effort to traverse. When one reaches the sovereign state, the distance collapses. The desire and the realization are revealed to be the same event, merely viewed from different angles of consciousness. How does one maintain this collapse of duality? The how is found in the absolute surrender to the present moment. You must stop trying to live in your manifestation and begin to be the manifestation. When you move through the world, you are no longer a visitor. You are the source. If the world shows you a condition that does not match your internal command, you do not adjust your internal command to fit the world. You hold the internal state with such diamond-like clarity that the world, the stubborn, lagging reflection, is forced to reorganize. This is the ultimate secret of the masters. They never work on their reality. They maintain their identity. Their identity is the gravity that bends the environment. You have moved beyond the necessity of techniques, affirmations, or rituals. Those were merely training wheels for a soul learning to walk in its own power. Now, the power is not something you use. It is what you are. Your presence itself is the decree. You have arrived at the point where your inner landscape is so lush, so abundant, and so divinely ordered that the outer world cannot help but mirror it with total precision. The sovereign departure is your exit from the world of cause and effect, and your entry into the world of pure, unadulterated, creative power. In the ancient annals of the kingdom of Oros, there was a king who was beloved by his people, not for his decrees, but for his presence. Unlike his predecessors, who remained sequestered in the high towers of the palace, this king would walk the fields of his realm every dawn. He did not wear his crown. He did not carry his scepter. He wore the simple tunic of a commoner. One day, his advisors approached him, terrified. "Your Majesty," they pleaded. There is a great drought upon the northern provinces. The crops are dying, and the people are beginning to whisper of famine. You must issue a royal decree, command the water, and perform the rites of the harvest. The king looked at them with eyes that held the tranquility of a deep, undisturbed lake. The rain does not come because I command it from a throne, he said. The rain comes because the land knows it is held in a state of prosperity. He walked out into the parched fields, where the earth was cracked and the stalks were yellowed with thirst. He did not look at the dry soil with concern. He looked at the horizon with the expectation of a man who knows his own domain. He simply walked, breathed, and felt the abundance of the kingdom in his own marrow. He sat upon a stone in the center of the field and, for hours, did nothing but exist in the absolute, unshakable certainty that his kingdom was whole. He did not pray for rain. He stood in the frequency of the harvest. By the time he returned to the palace, the skies had darkened, not with the storms of chaos, but with the gentle, rhythmic clouds of a seasonal blessing. The rain fell, not as a miracle that broke the rules of nature, but as a natural consequence of the king's alignment. He hadn't changed the weather. He had changed the state of the land by occupying the state of the ruler. He knew that the king and the kingdom were not two, but one. The bridge you have crossed has no railing. You are now standing in the territory of the sovereign, where your words do not merely describe reality, they dictate it. To embody this today, you must shed the last vestige of the performer. You are not acting as a success, you are the success. You are not pretending to be an heir. You are the manifestation of the inheritance. When you leave this space, do not go back to checking. Do not go back to asking the world if it has heard your command. It heard. It is responding. It has no choice but to respond, for the universe is merely a mirror, and you are the only image. Your only task for the rest of your life is to remain in the sovereign departure. If a situation arises that seems to contradict your desire, do not waver. Say within yourself, I am the ruler of this experience, and watch as the situation dissolves into the order of your command. You have effectively closed the book on the old self. The chapters of struggle are behind you, permanently filed away in the history of a person you used to be. You are the sovereign of your consciousness. The ritual is complete, but the life of the heir is just beginning. You have walked through the 10th gate, and you find yourself in a space that is both vast and familiar. Yet, as you look out upon this new horizon, a question lingers, one that the old self never dared to ask. If the power to create is this absolute, and the kingdom is already yours, what is the true nature of the destiny you are now free to write? You have learned to command the day. Now, you must learn to command an eternity. The bridge ends here, but the journey toward the absolute unfolds in the silence. The work is done. The manifestation is here, and so it is.